What are you doing?
I'm cranking my greasy hog.
Hell yeah.
Mmm.
バトブラスターズ
So there it is, boys. Greased lightning.
That's what they call it. That's what the boys called it.
Yeah, that's what the boys called it over there where our freedom got. Yeah, no, the grease gun. Like we've been doing pretty much now a series on all of the 45 subguns of the Second War, and well, this was the last one really on our side. Well, the first of the last one because it is a superior M3, not A1. Not all cost reduced. And I mean, it really needs little introduction. This thing is, this is another one of those guns where you don't, it's like the opposite of all of the other guns we've talked about.
Right.
Like there's almost no like mythos about it, right? There's like people don't really make bullshit up about them.
Like the most like parroted sayings you get is that they are made out of soup cans, super cheap, extra super mega cheap.
Cost $2.
Yeah, $2.
Cost $2
in the bag of chips.
yeah, which they did. But there's really nothing like objectively wrong with that from a military equipment standpoint,
right?
And the other like main thing you hear about it, very slow, right? And then finally, the cranker to fall down and break.
Yeah, the cranker will just fall off.
Yeah, the ass cranker break. What this thing is really is a scaled up Sten gun.
Right.
Like, it manifestly, when you look at the magazine, it is just straight up a copy. They were like, take that gun, put it on the Xerox, make it bigger. But they did learn some lessons from the Sten gun and incorporated them into this. Believe it or not, there's some really, really slick engineering going on. Now, this one is very early. I mean, despite it being 186,000th, right? It's early on, so we don't have the integrated mag loader in the ass stock.
Yep.
And we have the oil bottle, which doesn't seem very useful, but whatever. But yeah, a very early pattern grease gun, and of course the most notable feature, the crank handle, which I adore. To me, that's
amazing.
Yeah, and you know why? Because when you're shooting it, you can undercharge it like an AK, and that feels very cool. I've never run a grease gun that was jank charged.
Yeah.
But I do have a shit fire that you do the same thing.
And there's an MPL too that we have to do that with.
Yeah.
But that's not on purpose.
Yeah, that one was broken. But anyway, yeah. I don't even really know how much to say about this thing aside from
there's some perception of like of them being like cheapest chips gun, like cheap as in bad,
like dangerously cheap,
right? And from a standpoint of their construction, I don't disagree with people getting that impression because I mean, just looking at the thing, there's like a certain last ditch, like when the U.S. designed this, they weren't doing bad in the war. Things, in fact, were going pretty well for them.
Yeah. And
it looks like this was something that you'd expect out of bombed out Germany when they're like, oh fuck, oh fuck, oh fuck, oh fuck, oh fuck.
Yeah. Yeah, no, especially down to the two halves welded together
like
all around.
Fat weld seams that you feel whenever, everywhere you touch on the gun, there's a weld seam. Every finger touches a weld seam when you hold the gun.
Yeah.
I guess except your trigger finger. It's fortunate.
Yeah.
It just gets the trigger.
But then your next finger is touching the most uncomfortable trigger.
Right. And that's probably the one... ergonomically speaking, this gun actually isn't bad. Even left-handed. This gun, ergonomically speaking, isn't bad, except the trigger guard is sharp.
Yeah.
And uncomfortable, and it sits too low below the trigger.
Yeah, so you don't actually have enough space to get a good purchase on it.
And that may have been like a winter glove consideration. Like they figured this way you can get a winter glove on that trigger and still use it. However, they kept, I believe they kept the same sort of stupidity whenever they moved to this cocker. You're not cocking that with a winter glove. You're taking your glove off or something.
Yeah. Or you have a
The
rod.
stick.
Stick charge. The other like interesting thing about this is the safety, which is the dust cover.
Yep.
So that's safe, right? It holds it open so the trigger does nothing. Or you're prevented from pulling this, and even if you did pull it through, it would be locked in place by the dust cover with the hole in it. I guess that's the type of thing you need to have for soldier proofing, because they had observed, like, this is, and make no doubt about it, this is a Sten copy. Like, it is a Sten clone. And it was observed that if you gave, few-toothed British people Sten guns, they would load the mag, have it on a closed bolt, and then drop it. Then it would do funny things. So with the grease gun, the doctrine is, if you have this shit closed, it's not going to do anything. Yeah. Which is kind of smart. The only issue I have with that is that there's a flat spring that just acts against this, and it retains itself closed but not open.
Yep.
So it just like is free to move around open. That said, like, it doesn't move around enough, and it has to move a whole 180 degrees to get in your way. Like, it hasn't been a problem in my, messing around with the gun, but it is, I do still think it's a, something worth pointing out. The rear sight is very interesting. You get an interesting sight picture because you get these, like, that weird patterning around the rear aperture.
Right.
And I think that's a holdover from the Army's desire for everything to be a target sight, because that reminds you of the insert apertures that have that shit.
And I think part of that's meant to shake off glare or differing sunlight conditions, like if one sight's illuminated and one isn't by the sun.
And it works, because you do get a nice sight picture despite the fact that your front sight is just
a ground down post.
It's just some bullshit. Yeah, it's literally the leftover of welding the seams together. Yeah, and where the welds are, it's brutal. Like, look at these where the for lack of a better word, front trunnion is welded to the clamshells, and they're just like, yeah, angle grinder, that's good.
Yeah.
Or not angle grinder, that would have been like a
grinding wheel,
a tool post grinder.
Yeah.
That they would have just spun this thing around and said, good to go. But the thing is, a Marshall defensive weapon like this, and like this is really a PDW, it doesn't need to be super high quality. It just needs to be functional.
And this gun is coming in at the same era that the M1 carbine is starting to be more widely deployed. And sort of the advantage of this over the carbine initially is compactness.
Right.
Where the carbine didn't initially have a folding stock, and even with the carbine's folding stock, it was sort of a design of dubious quality. Whereas this design, as hard as it may seem to believe, is a much better thought out compact package sort of design.
It really is.
So for your guys that are really, really not, because you've got echelons of how likely people are to shoot at people, where frontline troops have your BARs and your Garens and your machine guns, right? Because they're expected to be shooting at people.
Yeah.
Then you have your guys that there's a reasonable probability they might have to. So your machine gun teams could use M1 carbines, because getting a 1919 swung over 90 degrees is going to be tricky.
Right.
So having a carbine just to shoot the one guy so you can get back to having fun with your belt fed would be advantageous. So carbines are good to have around then. Or artillery crews, or guys who are ammo tenderers close to the front line. Their job is really carrying ammo.
Right.
But if they ran into a guy when they're carrying ammo, it would suck if they just had a pistol.
Right.
Meanwhile, then you've got the guys that are like, if they have to shoot at somebody, everything's gone wrong. So your tank crews and these sorts of things, your vehicular guys and your rear echelon sort of guys. This is a great gun for, because even more so than the carbine, it carries better. No, it carries better than it shoots, but it doesn't shoot bad.
Right. And you know what? The thing is, it's actually a total pussycat. It does carry really well. But I think the moral of the story of our exploration of all the 45 subguns is likely to be that, I'll give away the end of the anime here. 45 subguns are bad.
It's kind of difficult to make one really good.
Yeah. But this really does the job. And like, it does everything that it serves every job that those other ones would, and it does it at a tiny fraction of the cost. and shockingly better.
Right.
Like
It-
horrifyingly better.
It leaves a bad taste in my mouth to say it. You know, especially because the Thompson has charm. Even if I hate it, I can't deny its charm. And this thing is almost completely devoid of charm.
Yeah.
It's like a charm horseshoe, where it's got charm because it's awful, and the Thompson has charm because it's so elaborate.
Yeah. Whereas there's one piece of charm out here that's this,
Right.
and that's ruined when you make it the bean jerker.
Right.
But it's just like, and as we go into it, you'll see more. But I don't know if it was on purpose or not. But they made this thing
Good.
and here, like, not even just in terms of it's cheap and like, because you guys have heard us talk about how we don't believe in the government wasting money on whatever or not. That's true. This is a great job of that. Somehow it's still a better gun. Even though they spent a 16th of what of what the Thompson cost. But I mean, fuck it. It's gonna speak for itself. Here we go. Open bolt subgun means bad trigger, right? £2, 12 ounces.
Yep, that sounds about right.
And it's clean. Like, here,
Go ahead and try that again.
Something weird happened there. But that was 3 pounds, 4 ounces. Let's hold it nice. 3 pounds, 3 ounces.
Yeah, it's a 3 pound pull, and I mean, it does feel like a submachine gun trigger, where it feels like you're dropping a sear,
but it's so short. It's a really short trip.
Yeah.
It's like,
and this gun being a transferable, right? It probably had stuff.
No, that hasn't been fucked with.
You don't think so?
No, don't think so. I mean, we'll look in there a little more, but like, I know who owned this and who you got it from. I don't think it's been fucked with. It may be like oddly good, right? But kind of the way the trigger mechanism works on this, it takes the
mechanical advantage from the way the trigger works,
and it takes the Sten's mechanical advantage and then spreads it out further, so you get further mechanical advantage. The Sten is capable of having a very good trigger, but the way the Sten receiver was designed was to have the sear exaggerate up into the receiver, and you don't get that here, and it's for a good reason, and it's because the bolt, right? I'm getting ahead of myself. The one complaint I had about grease guns when I would look at them and knowing how they were made is that, that's stupid, right? Because it's made of, Campbell soup can, and if you drop it and dent this, your bolt's going to lock up and it's going to be too easy to blah, blah, blah. Then we took this apart and we realized the bolt is not touching the receiver.
The bolt doesn't. When you think about tube guns, right? It's the tube. It's the bolt riding in the tube. The bolt doesn't actually ride on the tube in this gun.
And so let's take a look at that. And you've got a fairly. This is more robust than the Sten's version of this, where you've got a fat spring pushing a substantial, multi-pronged lock on the barrel itself.
And that barrel is one big Chug Douglas.
Yeah, it's definitely a chugler. Then we're going to pull the stock out. Then we're going to... This is one part that we don't like. Have to get the trigger guard up and out. The belly comes out. And there's your whole recoiling mass assembly. Notice there's no feature, and again, Sten, but there's no feature for it to ride in the receiver. Except these two, which protrude from the back of the receiver from two holes. And then these two pins that sit on this plate that is held in place in the trunnion, which is much more substantial.
Right, and this is keyed into the trunnion, and these two pegs protrude from the rear of the receiver, and that keeps the rods from twisting independent of each other. And that means that these rods are more or less rigid, and the bolt just rides on the rods. It doesn't... The receiver itself does not come that close to the bolt.
It literally the bolt is just sliding on two greased rods,
So you could have dents and dings in the receiver,
which
and
this one does.
and in fact have a significant amount of debris, dirt, and grime in the receiver, and the gun will continue to work fine.
Yes, which is super
It's
impressive.
brilliant.
And so here's just to kind of like show off what we're talking about. There's your sear. We're getting acceleration on the trigger. So that's why it's such a clean job. And you know what? We can pull the sear out.
Yep.
And see if, because it should be manifest if it's been dicked
Stoned
with.
down. Is that the sear plug on the bolt? Because that shit's rounded over.
There's the sear.
That shit's been fucked with. Well, or it's just worn out.
That is just worn. Well, but it wears on both. It wears all the way across.
Oh, does it?
Yeah.
So it's just touching one?
No, it's touching them. It's touching there too. But it starts at full engagement. I guess it then just kind of slips by, but but that sear itself, the sear itself is in normal shape. I think it might be like, like you were saying, it might be that wear on the corner of the sear surface makes it slip by a little faster.
Yeah.
But I don't think that that's making this gun feel so much better. You know what I mean? I think that this might feel like 10% smoother, but when you see how quickly that sear wants to jump out of the way, I feel like that's just what these feel like.
Yeah.
Because we start engaging up here, and so yeah, there's certainly like an acceleration that happens where it's kind of like pulling off, which that's definitely intentionally cut at an angle though, which is alarming. Like if you look in the clean parts of that sear surface on the bolt,
Oh, yeah.
it's at an angle. So that might be part of the design, that's odd. But whatever. I haven't heard reports of these, slipping and whatever. And I do think that the way the math works out, there's a lot of spring tending the sear up while it's not firing. But the only difference between this and a Sten setup is the lack of a disconnector, which makes it much more robust. And it's also two-sided. The transfer fire is two-sided as opposed to just trying to poke it down the center. That mag catch is also straight Sten, but they added a big quality of life improvement. This
Having a box around it.
Box
so you
around-
don't
yeah.
bump it.
and that enables you to left hand grab it without the mag just falling out all the time. Really cool. And coil spring, thank God. You'd think that coil springs were illegal when you look at World War II subguns. The one thing about this is like when you pull the belly off, God, that shit looks like you're really
Right.
you're really in touch with just how chintzy that is.
Yeah.
Still, interestingly, that stock design,
It's pretty darn solid for
it's
what it is.
really solid. Yeah. And it is accomplished by doing half moon cuts in the stock as opposed to cutting all the way through, which is something that was copied for a long time in a lot of different European subguns. This is the Sten's fire control retention system, exactly the same. The one thing that when I look at this, my eyes go straight to it. It's right here, the grip texture.
Yeah, stamped grip texturing is.
I want to see the stamping tools because that shit's fucked up.
Yeah.
Like that's just weird. No, also by the way, in my particular gun, somebody decided to JB weld over where there was dents. It looks great. I'm glad they did that.
That was in the military armors menu,
Yeah.
I think.
And so this is the the belly pan, right, which on a Sten would just serve to protect the fire controls, but on this gun, what is a little house for your oiler, which I don't.
Does you so much. It's
Yeah.
already a grease gun. You still need oil.
Yeah, I've never pulled this off. I don't want to bother. And then there's your Kickstarter. I don't think it makes sense to call it a Kickstarter, but now that that's been put into my head, I think it makes more sense to call it a hand crank. But it's super interesting, right? There's that U-shaped piece that connects up to this arm. As the bolt is sitting there, and you're cranking back, this is tending to want to go to the back, and if the bolt is there, it only has the opportunity to travel rearward, right? So when the bolt's not there, it just looks weird. But the bolt being present limits the movement to make it go rearward. It's really not as delicate as people say it is. To me, the most delicate part of this is the ejector, and that stayed the same.
Right.
Going to the ruggedized M3A1. The only part of it that I think is really weird is this this spring.
Yeah, there's a couple of there's a torsion spring in there that's like maybe 050 wire diameter. It's hilariously thin, and if it were to break, this crank would not work so good.
Yeah, no, without that, it's not gonna do anything. It's really weird how they did that, and it's like captured in. Oh no, they ground a little. There's a ground little path for it in between those. I love the crank. That's like that makes the gun to me.
Yeah. We were discussing earlier, why the crank. Since putting a bolt handle on this could have been possible, and I think it may have come down to the fact that they didn't want the bolt to touch the receiver at all, and adding a bolt handle slot with this sort of system means that you're going to need pretty severe clearance to it.
Right.
And so it may have just been a thing where they didn't want that, because you've got a gap, right? The bolt doesn't seal to the receiver, so it's not going to act as its own dust cover. So you're just going to have the gap between the receiver and the bolt always present,
right?
Which is going to be a problem for debris ingress. Whereas here, this is a pretty darn sealed up gun.
Yeah, pretty well sealed up. And then when you look at how they solved it the only way they could without adding a slot into it. Of course, there were wartime or field expedient grease guns that were damaged, and then they added Sten style charging handles. But so then you get two problems. You get dirt and dust ingress, which if you just loaded this bitch up with grease to make it run incredibly smooth would be a problem.
Yep.
But then on top of that, you also now have to deal with any damage to this admittedly weak tube is going to potentially be imparted and disrupt that track. So it is not an insane reasoning why they did all that. But here's the other interesting thing. This is the heaviest bolt of the four. Yeah. World War II 45 subguns by 50 grams. And would you believe it's the slowest firing?
Yes.
Here's the other thing. A lot of people think the grease gun is constant recoil. That would tell you it is not.
Yes. At least at some point with some particular load of ammo, it is bottoming out.
Yes. Well, and it has bottomed out a lot.
Repeatedly.
Right. So, but the weird thing is it feels so smooth you could easily believe. The thing is, I'm not going to lie to you guys. The thing is straight up comfy.
Right.
To shoot.
It's very, especially in contrast with the Thompson.
Yeah.
The Thompson is almost uncomfortable. It's sort of got a jackhammery effect going on. The grease gun doesn't have any of that sort of thing going on.
The grease gun is a 100%. And see here, we're talking about the keyed feature here. That and then the holes at the rear are what keeps the bolt, in line. It's so charming. It all just works. Is the best part of it. Oh yeah, this is, you know, compared to the Thompson, which is like, well, the M1, and we actually, you know, funny enough, we had the rarest of the Thompsons,
Right.
a straight M1, no A1. Pisses in your eye, so there's that. And then it's also just really fast and kind of wandering a little bit. So it's alarming. This is a straight up, both eyes open the whole time. Like, you're not losing the rear sight, you're not losing the front sight.
Really
you have
easy
a
to shoot.
full sight picture the whole time you're shooting it. There's just really I hate that.
Yeah, that's not good.
There's just really no comparison there.
I guess one thing I will say about this gun that I noticed when shooting it was the cadence of it is not unpredictable, but hard to predict.
Oh yeah,
where
that's an interesting part.
the resting position of the bolt is right behind where it picks up a round from the magazine, right? But whenever the gun fires, it then cycles about 6 inches longer than where the bolt's resting position is.
So we can show that here. So yeah, that's an important point, because with open bolt guns, as we've talked about many times, there's that schlorp, right? When you pull the trigger the first round, there's a disturbance as it travels home, right? Especially with the weight transfer and everything. With this, there's something really interesting. In that when you first fire it, you're starting from right here, right? Here, I'll put my finger all the way up there. But then watch after the second shot.
Bolt comes back quite a bit further.
Yeah.
Maybe about 4 inches.
Yeah, 3 or 4 inches. And so you've got the 3 and 4 inches rear, and then also the 3 or 4 inches forward. So that's a big difference in delay and movement.
So the sort of cadence you internalize for the first shot is that bang, it went off really quick after I pulled the trigger, and you're expecting it to go bang, 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 bang. Instead it goes bang, 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 bang.
Yeah. Doop, 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 doop. Right. And so it settles down really quick, but
and so because of that, it's a very easy gun, especially after shooting a Thompson, to get your second shot below your first shot, where you're expecting that second shot to come much sooner, just given the cadence of the gun after you pull the trigger. So, you know, especially if you're used to shooting open bolts that aren't set up like this. I know the Sten is a pretty similar system where it's got lots of over travel.
Right.
But if you shot a lot of submachine guns recently that don't have a lot of over travel, it's easy to get your second shot to be low with this thing without even thinking about it.
Because you're correcting. Yeah, that's we saw that happening to you.
Yeah.
One little niggling complaint I have is in their decision in going with the full like Sten mag. You wind up with a really long mag.
Giant mag.
It's ridiculous. And that kind of ruins the like handiness of it a little bit. And maybe we didn't need 32 rounds, like especially with how slow it is. Maybe there should have been 25 or 26, but I mean, compared to everything, like still with everything else, you know, that it's not a deal breaker. And on top of that, they made accessories for it. Look,
you can scratch your barrel off.
There's the barrel scratcherizer, which I'm not going to tighten onto. But yeah, look, they made a loud insert for it. The Flash Hider M9. That's dumb as shit.
Yeah, it's pretty awful.
It's really stupid. Barrel scratcherizer. It's a Cullet. Based loud insert. Oh, here's the other funny thing. This gun, I've been shooting for a while, and you had to tell me my extractor was broken.
Yes.
So yeah, and then look at I have 50% of an extractor. I have not noticed.
Yeah, the extractor is just sort of chipped off, but you know, especially with it being an open bolt blowback gun, the extractor doesn't do much.
Yeah, it's like, okay, who cares?
During blowback, the case is blowing itself out of the chamber, and the extractor is just sort of there to act as a pivot point.
Yeah.
And you're usually not, you know, unless a jam has happened, if you got a dud round, you're not jacking rounds out of it.
Yeah. And what's interesting is that cut there probably serves to help a lot. You know, if you're having weak extraction like this one probably is, or weak ejection, this little scoop.
It's probably
Kinda-
actually required for it, because
Yeah.
whenever you look at something like an MP5, they ended up having to put a little scoop that sits
Yeah.
into the receiver to help kick rounds out, because you know the receiver geometry and bolt head geometry
Yeah.
is based on a 308, where the case is like this,
Yeah.
and then in a 9mm the case is like this, and the case isn't actually long enough to find the outside of the gun,
Right.
so it needs a little scooper. Like you just got a primary ejector and then a
Yeah.
secondary ejector
Yeah.
that gets it out of the gun.
Get out of here.
And this thing's probably got a similar. That's the reason for the cut on the bolt, is a similar thing going on there, where the primary extractor just gets it off the bolt face,
Yeah.
and then that scoop shape helps it get out of the gun.
Yeah. Super cool. It'd be cool to watch on slow-mo. But yeah, guys, so we're going to shoot some stuff with this, and I am curious to see how this one's going to do on the can test.
Yep.
Where you have a certain amount of, you know, we see how much time it takes to engage with a can at a certain distance with each subgun. It's either going to be great or kind of annoying, right? It's either going to be you nail it with the first round, or it's you find the rhythm.
Right.
But I do think that this is so slow that the rhythm probably comes after like three shots. But let's find out. All right, and I guess we should also explain what we're doing here. This challenge is what we've come up with, and it tests the most authentic, correct circumstance, how to do it. So there's soda can over there, and we got 45 gun here. And so what it is on the start signal, which will be the M1 Garand ping, that's how you know your guy needs your support. And so we've got authentic targets. The targets is the sodium can, and the sodium can is the exact size of Japanese head. So we're testing from the start. You got to engage and destroy one regulation Japanese head at 25 yard meters. And this will test each one to see if it's best. All right. Shooter is ready. I shot him.
So I've got a different strategy. I talked with my grandpepper on the Iwo Jima, and they said they never used the skites. They said it was a trench broom and a shoot from the hip only. That's not actually what he said at all. But I am interested in seeing there is doctrinal like training use of these subguns that's meant to be hip point shooting. And so I'm going to see if I can hit our regulation Jap head here at 25 yards, hip shooting only.
Let me know when you're ready.
Hold it on the magazine now.
Yeah, that's what you want to do, a full rip like that. Yep.
All right. Ready. Yeah!
You did hit him.
Eventually. He was scared the whole time, too.
All right, guys. So that was the grease gun. Not bad.
That's a pretty good gun.
Yeah.
I like the grease gun, and especially in comparison with the more faster submachine guns. It's certainly a breath of fresh air, where this is like weirdly slow.
Yeah.
And it's enjoyable to, and I guess that's sort of like contrary, where it's like the machine gun. There's a machine gun Dunning-Kruger curve where it's like the best machine guns are the ones that shoot the fastest, and then you come down off the curve and it's like eventually you realize it's the best machine guns are the for the slow ones.
Slow is good.
Because
Although there is a limit.
right, early on it's very fun to shoot machine guns because they go fast, but then you realize that like
My eyes feel weird.
with some exceptions,
Yeah.
by the time you're getting over 600 rounds per minute, it gets kind of tricky to control some stuff.
Yeah.
With 22 stuff, whatever, it just barks away.
Yeah.
But for most things, at least for me, 600 is sort of that happy place where once you get much over that, it's tricky to control.
The big, of course, and then there's cheating, right? But the big thing that, and the more I've shot machine guns that I've noticed, is that there's a lot of different factors that go into whether you can maintain acquisition of the sights. Of course, red dots are cheating, right? But for real guns, it's really easy to lose one of the sights, either the rear sight or the front sight. And then we know, like, you oftentimes on AKs you just like lose it,
right?
But then we messed around with the Draco and put an infuriator comp on it, and it just like, for some reason, it just lets you keep the front sight.
You can get the front sight, and then the rear sight just sort of like there-ish.
Yeah,
but the edges of your vision get dark.
You can focus on that and like drill stuff with it.
Yeah.
Whereas this gun is just like, it's kind of unique, and the only ones that I know of like this are this gun and the suppressed Sterling, where you can just like sit there and the whole time, well, and the fucking Ultimax, but the whole time your eyes are open and you're just like, I know exactly what I'm doing. Like I'm hosing on that right there.
It would be interesting to have one of these with a big old suppressor on it, but you need a suppressor that didn't add a ton of back pressure.
Yeah.
It would be very interesting from a standpoint of for shooter experience, and then maybe some sort of a buffer system that would make the action quieter, because it is a lot of metal on metal going on there. But that would get you to like maybe the most user pleasurable machine gun.